About 3 years ago, I told you about my top 10 coasters, but only based on the footage that I personally shot. Since then, I've been on a bunch of new rides, surpassed my 300 credit benchmark, and gone to a handful of other bucket list parks in the US because I really need to do an international trip sometime. So if you got any suggestions and good routes on areas, be sure to comment down below. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy what I do here. Hold on, I got a coaster hat. I think my Prowler one's in the car, but this definitely works. So here we go, actual list time. And what better time to do it than when the Thusies are doing their hashtag 25 days of coasters or whatever. I don't know, I'm Jewish, but the most I ever do on Christmas is kind of eat Chinese food and watch movies or whatever. Or I guess go to Kings Island's Holiday in the Park to marathon my Septembers. But today, I'm talking about my top 25 favorite coasters after having ridden 379 that I've experienced all over the USA. This may be a long one, so sit back, relax, and this is where I was going to do a kind of show for Raise Energy because get a drink or whatever. Also, I've been scripting and putting this thing off for so long that they no longer do their affiliate program. So, GamerSups, G Fuel, anyone else? I'm a free agent now. Before we get started though, here's a couple of honorable mentions of rides that generally mad that didn't make the top cut here. Because I originally made a list of about 64 candidates, and of course we gotta cut down to the top 25 for a 25 video. Orion, my home park Giga Coaster, world's tallest hypercoaster, whatever you guys want to call it. It goes 300 feet, it goes down a valley, shut up, it counts. This thing is short and sweet. Pretty much all of its elements slap, including that first drop that goes on literally forever. A bunch of high-banking maneuvers, even going up to that finale, which potential gray out helix, I never grayed on it, but the finale, that curves ejector pop going into the brake run, why? That is so fantastic. Honestly, if I ever get back down to Carowinds and check out Fury 325 because it was broken last time I was down there, if that's what I am to suspect, being that like times 3 times length, I understand why Fury is everyone's #1 steel coaster. Speaking of B&Ms, another park that I'm going to talk about in a second, Silver Dollar City, one of my favorite parks I've been to. They have a little coaster in the back that like I thought was just going to be like whatever throne coaster. Freaking Wildfire. This thing like exudes speed. I've not been on a B&M that just feels that fast. Maybe it's the low to ground terrain, maybe it's the placement on top of the mountain, which that view we talk about for a second, overlooking the Ozarks and lakes and all that fun stuff. Beautiful scenic view, but the ride itself is just fantastic. It just goes so fast. You got a nice pop of floater going down that first straight drop, and the elements, zoom, zoom, zoom. I mean, like I said, I was expecting this to just be a run-of-the-mill B&M. It genuinely took me by surprise. One of my favorite coasters there. I wrote down a mountain coaster as an honorable mention here. Oh yeah, this is going to be a real quick shout out, but the Lost Mountain Coaster at Pigeon Forge, that's not a mountain coaster. That is a 9-minute long themed mine train roller coaster. And that's all I can say about it. Just, if you're in Pigeon Forge, make sure to check that out. Easily the best mountain coaster I've ever been on. And finally, before we get started on number 25, the one that should have made it, X2. As I get close to next year's 400 credit threshold, I only find it appropriate to feature number 300. X2 was an experience. You take a hypercoaster filled with inversions and vertical drops, throw in some fire and music effects because why not, all while a fourth rail just independently rocks you all over the place. It's unique, but in the best way possible. There's a few negative things I associate with this, like its horrible capacity, the fact that it ultimately brought Aero to bankruptcy, but its younger Japanese siblings basically fixed all these issues, and Ichinaika even politely bows. It's pretty hard to describe how a 40 that isn't a free spin feels, but adding a controlled flip mechanism and a controlled spin to a giant normal coaster mechanic instead of just a is something that just needs to be experienced, and I'm glad that I finally did to make it my number 300. Alright, we've stalled enough, let's talk about the actual list. Magnum XL 2 bajillion. As an airtime junkie born and raised in Ohio, it's only natural that I talk about the original Hyper for a little bit. If nothing else, Maggie's got infinite value in the ride industry for first breaking that 200-foot barrier and starting the great coaster war of the 90s and 2000s. God, I'm old. The ride time itself may just be a fast airtime machine, but those are fast airtime hills that race around the water park, around the beach with a few good tunnels, and those triangle hills on the way home are just absolute ejector heaven. Maybe just add some more comfortable restraints there, please. Also gotta give this thing some nostalgia points for being the first thing I ever experienced at Cedar Point. I made a point to always park in the back now just to make this my initial ride during each visit, unless it's time for a rope drop running of the Bulls ZRT, of course. Up next, we have a case of rides that would probably be higher on this list back in the day. Superman Ride Bazaar New England Edition used to be known as one of the best steel coasters in the world for many years, and I could see why. Well, it starts off as a simple airtime filled out and back hyper with some funny Six Flags superhero theming. Actually, something pretty cool. I mean, like, you got those Superman, mist-filled tunnels and the rings and stuff, and it's tight. The second half randomly turns into a high-speed twister with swooping hills and plenty of laterals. The new seats were a bit uncomfortable for my one ride, but honestly that wasn't even a restraint issue like I was afraid it would be. It was more just the backs themselves bouncing and digging into me a little bit. But I'm sure that the original trains were at least 10 times better, so I didn't really let that deter me too much, especially since my one backseat ride was still pretty fun. Need some more laps to really get into detail on this thing since my visit was... But I definitely understand how this thing used to get golden tickets before the age of RMCs and good Vacomas. Mystic Timbers. What can I say besides this is the reason to come to Kings Island now that Vortex is gone. Twisted back GCI? Check. Tons of laterals and airtime sprinkled throughout? Double check. In the woods, racing around the park's train and Ripper Rapids ride. Yeah, this thing is basically what the Beast should have been if it was designed today. Besides, it not being the world's longest wooden roller coaster or whatever. And yes, this means that this thing gives some of the most insane night rides I've ever experienced. Even with that shed ending being a bit of a letdown, this themed GCI experience is more than what I was expecting it to be. Even if that ending is basically just some radio music combined with some practical effects while you're staying in a big shed and waiting for a mediocre jump scare. That jump scare having multiple different endings for rewritability or whatever. Fantastic wooden coaster, very well paced, but whatever you do, don't go in the shed. Moving from my home park, my most recent new park visit, I think I'm an old school George Cloth fan now. When I went to Six Flags Over Texas this year, I did expect this to be one of the highlights along with the world's first RMC. Look, I'm wearing the shirt right now. Bit of a spoiler here though, New Texas Giant, while being a fantastic coaster in its own right and kind of a spiritual twin to something appearing a little bit later, didn't even make the initial cut of 64 that I was considering for this list. This one did. Shockwave seems to be one of the best of both worlds in terms of forces, ranging from comfortable yet crushing circular loops to standing ejector airtime pops coming off some of those drops. Not to mention some nice lats throughout. All these things plus with the fact that it has a pure lap bar restraint, no over the heads, no weird anything, nothing. This basically just exemplifies the fact that any airtime you get, you just a little bit higher. I'm only sad it took me until this year to experience this classic, but it being on the back of the park meant minimal lines and maximum re-rides, even when the park was otherwise absolutely slammed to the point where I actually need to invest in a fast lane for once. If you guys want to help support this channel and help me afford more skip the line passes, don't forget to leave me a tip on Ko-Fi. Moving on to the first time I talk about one of my favorite Indiana parks that I am a couple hours away from. This is the reason that Hollywood Nights was originally called Stark Raven Mad. This thing is fun. While the entrance experience coaster may be dwarfed by its two younger siblings, Edgar Allan Poe's Woody in the Woods still packs quite the punch. Be it the okay airtime the first half, a beautiful turnaround around Lake Rudolph, or basically everything happens after that fifth drop. This spurt is in fact the word. And going back to that fifth drop, oh my God. Absolute ejector out of nowhere, leading to what I can only describe as 10 seconds of what the Beast is supposed to be, since it just flies through this wood. I talked about Wildfire having a suspension of speed before. This has got the zoomies. The finale feels way too short, though. You just get the drop into, then you're just done. You pull up until it breaks, and you're like, okay, that was 2 seconds of epicness. Easily my most experienced thing at Holiday World besides free unlimited soft drinks, and I almost always find a way to marathon it for an hour or two, just because it's that enjoyable and super re-rideable. To quote the Raven, caw! Probably. I don't speak bird. Next up, we got the first RMC on my list. That is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom. I love that when I say that one of my favorite RMCs is really close by, I don't necessarily mean Steel Vengeance. Chaser may look small, but by God, it's a pack a punch with what it has. Barrel roll, first drop, absolute ejector hills, trick track, double up, double down, that just... I don't even know how you describe that, except hold on to your life, what are you doing? This is the finale of all time. And all the elements on that L-shaped turnaround thing can't even possibly begin to describe other than just the ability to absolutely yeet you up, down, and all around as it twists you every single direction besides upside down. Well, I guess it does feature some overbanks in that part, but you know what I mean. Such an insane ride for such a small park, and I'm glad I can honestly re-ride this thing anytime I feel like driving about 90 minutes south. And no, Twisted Timbers is not on this list, even though they share a very similar size and first drop. That one just felt very mid to me, despite my airtime preferences. Maybe I just caught on a bad day. Storm Chaser good, Twisted Timbers not as. And in this corner, I present a fun ride from a company known for their crazy, intense creations. While Cheetah Hunt may not be the most extreme mess of steel, it does a good job presenting one of my favorite animals that isn't, in fact, Coney. It bounces all over the park with bursts of speed, twists over a skyride, and now, water quarry? I don't honestly know what I'm calling that thing right now. Either way, this may have been designed as a family coaster with baby's first inversion, that little roll right before the brake run. But it's an insanely fun ride with a very satisfying ride length. At the end of the day, is that really what matters? Plus, like I said, Cheetah Coaster. I love the world's fastest kitty cat thing that's basically domesticated and trained like doggos. One of my favorite non-dog animals. Can't wait to revisit next year for round 2, and hopefully I'll be able to take enough time away from my inevitable Gwazi marathon to hang out with my favorite Cheetah Coaster again. Going from one Busch multi-launch Intamin coaster to another Busch family multi-launch coaster that could easily be mistaken from an Intamin, it's time to enter a German forest, I guess. Sadly, I never got to experience the glory that was Big Bad Wolf back in the day. Absolutely one of my bucket list coasters back then. Just go on a cool suspended coaster and have all those near misses and ride River Drop or whatever. Maybe 2.0 one day, but for now, Verbolten is the closest thing I'm going to personally experience to that Rhine River Drop. But hey, that creaky bridge sequence at the top with the awkward braking launch kind of... It's not bad. Car Coaster is filled with theming, surprises, and Easter eggs from the start to the end. Even in line, there's plenty of other Bavarian goodies leading up to, well, cars. The cars are cars. While the big box is mostly black until the drop track that I think I could spoil about 12 years after it premiered, this dark ride portion is just that. A bunch of hidden tricks that you need to experience to believe. Of course, the drop track having different theme sequences means rewritability, which is always nice, and the 2 launches have just enough punch. Yet another ride that's more about the theme and experience, but there's just enough forces to give someone like me a thrill. Next up is yet another launch coaster. Kind of. Not sure I can really rank this accurately since I've only experienced it with a launch track back in the good old days. The ride is a very interesting terrain RMC. Definitely lost a few unique innovation points since they lost the world's only launch wooden roller coaster for more consistent operations. But hey, they tried it for a while before they eventually converted it to a high-speed lift hill or whatever it's called. I just got myself lucky enough that most of my Dollywood visits, it was pretty operational. Putting that aside, though, this thing truly yeets you all over the place. I think my favorite part used to be that double first hill, how it launched you over and then it was valley and then into another hill that led into the real drop. Especially since cresting that second hill and just seeing the valley in front of you while you get ejected down the giant thing. Super cool. Of course, everyone raves about the finale, that quad down, twisted drop down the hillside, and I agree, but to me the ride is all about that first half when it just races through the woods with all those weird twisted hills and overbanks that RMC is known for. Can't wait to compare the high-speed lift to the original version next time I go down to Pigeon Forge. Did I really put 2 RMCs back to back here? Iron Rattler. Baby's first RMC was one of the world's first RMCs as well. I was lucky enough to have ridden the original Rattler back in the day since I have family down in Austin and occasionally do get to visit one of the world's best Six Flags parks. So I can compare and contrast a little bit here. I do miss the fact that this ride lost a lot of ride length from that top of the quarry wall, triple helix, hilly meso track, and the finale actually looping around a little bit more. You certainly cannot complain about the increased pacing. Rattler now features an insane near vertical twisted first drop, a curved double down that launches you higher and higher on each part of it while slamming you to the side, and a 0G roll that's only enhanced by the fact that this wooden coaster has pretty weird head choppers. Not to mention the cliff drive. I mean, we have to mention the cliff dive into the smoke-filled rocky tunnel for a finale that's pretty insane. Just like I said, it's a shame that it's over after that because you fly out of the tunnel and immediately slam into the brakes at way too much speed. Shame that Ironized Attraction's probably 1/3 as short as the original, but I suppose this is a quality versus quantity situation here. Speaking of train coasters, you know train coasters? Those things that hug the ground for their fancy maneuvers and increase sensation of speed. What if that's but an out and back that winds in and out of a mountain? And what if that train coaster featured single ratchet buzz bars for increased airtime and some Titan track to smooth out some of its rough spots? And what if said ride was the 5th longest wooden coaster in the US and only proved that by racing throughout the entire length of the park and beyond? That's Vortex. And I fully understand how it won all those golden ticket awards after my first visit to it this year. My only regret is that it only runs one train, which makes for really long lines on busy days, and of course leads to less re-rides without investing in the park skip the line ticket. A few rides I did get though were truly legendary, and I'd be happy to fly back to Connecticut sometime for round 2. Especially if Lake Compounds is open late, because this thing screams epic night rides. Oh god, I hate this part of the list. These next 4 coasters, I have no clue why they're in this order. Ladies and gentlemen, I present one of the most decisive coasters in the world. Or at least it used to be before it got those new restraints this year. I don't know, I'm gonna have to try this out next time. Need to head up there for Wildcat's Revenge. This compact hyper is intense. Intimidator 305 Junior intense. The first drop is one of the only moments I've ever experienced. I actually need to white knuckle hold on to restraints for my life because that kink partway down the first drop, absolutely ragdolls you. Then the simple figure eight-ish layouts just kind of fill with a bunch of airtime hills, low-to-ground transitions that absolutely launch you from side to side while ejecting you up all of those hills. Short but sweet, which is fine because, once again, intense. Wing seats also make this ride more of a unique experience than your typical air and lateral machine, and the ride placement over a lake and around some other rides is pretty nice. Can't wait to take off to the sweetest park on earth and experience its new airplane theme, but let's just say I'm on the side that actually appreciates this rush to the sky. At number 13, I have a shuttle coaster that has been cloned, but this is the shuttle coaster of all time. I'm sure this thing has issues thanks to its old LIM technology or the fact that they have some boosters that are vertically mounted almost 200 feet in the air. But why did Six Flags only ever order two Mr. Freezes? An inverting top hat, which has some weird bouncy airtime, a forceful overbank, and a vertical spike that boosts you up, making that return trip even faster. All while offering, like, standing floater, a couple seconds of it. You know what I'm talking about, doozies. Not to mention this thing actually has theming for Six Flags Coaster. Great entrance facade, the station that has the Mr. Freeze animatronic, and that being a dual station, so they have two trains going at the same time, which helps something like a shuttle coaster that otherwise has bad capacity have really good capacity. And the fact that the duo's placement makes both of them a pretty unique ride, the one in St. Louis basically being in the middle of the Rapids ride kind of secluded, whereas the one in Texas, right in the middle of like 5 other coasters, but they also have a forwards and backwards train, so you have multiple experiences on this thing. Why has Six Flags only ever bought 2 of these? Dear Premier, please fix whatever issues these had, change the launch to an LSM or whatever, and find more buyers since this is absolutely a godsend layout. Love someone that would probably buy one of these for every park ever if he was a gajillionaire. Make sure to drop a tip on Ko-Fi if you want to help support this channel. Moving on, this one's another one that's a bit hard to judge since it's been ages since my last Kennywood trip. I blame for being the only coaster in the world that's directly themed to a local sports ball team, and me being from Cincinnati. On to the subject at hand, though. Phantom's Revenge is debatably my 100th coaster. I wasn't really keeping good track of my credits way back in the day, and it definitely deserved that landmark if that's the case. The unique lap bar, which kind of goes from like the side down like that, really brings out the airtime, and this thing, from what I remember, really delivers in that category. Especially with that return run of Little Bunny Hop just absolutely ejecting you all over the place. Not that the first throw it gives Steel Phantom is Revenge, though. It's all about that second drop. You warm up with a nice swoop that's like, 100-something feet tall. Pretty cool first drop. And then rise up over the quarry wall to stare straight down into the abyss. And the Thunderbolt structure. Truly one of a kind moment. It's all about the placement, my guys. The nice airtime afterwards is just kind of an afterthought. Would have been great to experience the original, of course, as the world's first inverting hypercoaster. But yeah, even with just the big old curves and a bunch of little airtime hills, it's good. Just barely avoiding my top 10, and oh my god, why is this here? Why isn't it any of my honorary mentions or like the actual coaster at Kings Island that I care about? Guys, stick around, I promise that the actual top 10 makes sense. King Cobra at Kings Island is somehow my number 11. Talk about underrated. While everyone's always harps on Togo, I have some pretty enjoyable memories from my laps back in the day. Definitely favorite to the 2 other coasters that have started this place. I'm talking Son of Beast and Banshee. The world's first stand-up coaster had simple double out and back layouts, but those 2 laps were filled with trick track, a vertical loop, and a camelback airtime helix combo that used to eject me and keep me floating while the car was starting to go sideways. That alone is an experience I'll never forget. I know stand-up coasters don't typically get the best rep, but being in that unique position and going away from the heartline truly makes it what are normal elements a lot more unique. Maybe it's nostalgia talking or just the fact that I got to ride a lot before getting to travel to a bunch of other parks as a young enthusiast, but actually put a smile on my face every time, and I actually looked forward to riding its clones when they existed. Just a shame I'll never get the Skyliner experience when I finally hit up Canada's Wonderland. After seeing how this last 3 ranked, I'm sure you all think I'm insane, but there's a method to the madness, I assure you, and I agree. Why is Skyrush only number 14? Before we get to the Big 10 though, here's a couple of rides that will probably make this list if I had a few more re-rides to examine them. This first one. So, I'm heading back to Great Adventure next year as part of my road to 400. Rest in peace, King Baka. I never got to experience you, unfortunately. You guys know their big, Intamin, woody prefab that everyone rants and raves about. The big bull. El Toro Ryan, what up? El Toro is not on my list. Before you guys go over there, I have one thing to say about this. Like I said, I've only ever experienced it once. And the day after, on that same road trip, was my first time at Knoebels. I was even wearing the El Toro shirt. Yeah, for some reason, after riding Phoenix, I completely forgot that El Toro existed. Say what you guys want to say. We are going back for round 2 next year, and I can't wait to re-examine it. Speaking of good airtime, I went to Michigan's Adventure once. I was more hyped for freaking Wolverine Wildcat looking like a clone of this boy than the actual big coaster there that everyone cares about. Once again, I'm an airtime freak. I should be in love with Shivering Timbers, but like something about that did not vibe with me, and I got plenty of rides on it. Maybe go back sometime. I mean, Michigan's like a day trip for me, so you never know. But Shivering Timbers did not hit for me for some reason. And then speaking of things I'm going to be rewriting next year, hopefully, love me some Hershey Park. You guys already saw Skyrocket on the list, and you know I'm going back for Wildcat. Storm Runner, probably one of the best hydraulic coasters in the world, but the last time I got to ride that thing was 2006 during a school trip, because my last trip up there, it was unfortunately closed down for its refab. It would probably be somewhere in my top 25. I just haven't experienced it in a while. Top 10 time, Cyclops. You probably didn't think I'd be talking about Mount Olympus here, did you? The second smallest of the park's wooden quartet may be the best. Even though it's a simple figure-8 layout, those single ratchet buzz bars combined with some bouncy twisted hills lead to some legendary airtime. In fact, it was so insane that in recent years, this park's actually neutered the experience by removing that final car from the train. A car that you legally had to be 18 or older to experience, and for good reason. Now that it's long gone, I think I'm allowed to talk about why. That airtime on the first drop and on the last drop, so extreme, I actually got ejected over the divider for the car and landed on the other side. This literally happens twice on the ride. Like the first time, that first twisted hill, you go, then that final drop at the end, you go, how do you describe that? How is this legally possible? Like I said, there's a reason that you had to be 18 or older to experience this, and that they took the car off. Microphone died. Where was I? Oh yeah, Cyclops. So that airtime is absolutely insane. Probably the only time that this late 30s person has ever been happy is actually single, because I can't imagine what that would be like with someone else on the other side of the car from me. While we're here though, I want to mention Hades real quick for just barely missing that list at number 27. Mount Olympus understood the mission when they named the coaster with a giant underground tunnel after the god of the underworld. Nearly half a minute of the ride is spent underneath that parking lot where you can go under it twice with all sorts of underbank turns, tiny airtime pops, all sorts of surprises, and then you emerge into that gigantic corkscrew that's only plussed up by the myriad amount of head chopper supports. And that's just the part everyone cares about. Hades 360 also has a giant pre-lift segment with a big drop out of the station, nice little double dip curve, and a decent amount of other airtime pops outside of the big old tunnel segment. It's a bit of a rough ride unfortunately, but that's a little bit alleviated by the fact that it runs the first ever set of Millennium Flyers. Just a shame how Mount overruns things, but at least the carts and coasters there are really cook. Starting off the single digits, we're heading back to Indiana Beach because Anton Schwarzkopf was truly a master. This may be one of the only coasters I have legitimately needed to white knuckle in order to not actually get ragdolled around for that first half of the ride. Only the backseat though. In the front, I was literally smiling from ear to ear the entire time because this layout is fun. I did some positive forces that Schwartz loops are known for, a splash of floater towards the end, and I can see why these things used to grace all the European fairgrounds. If nothing else, this is easily my most traveled roller coaster from all the various locations it's been at and modifications it's had from different trains and stuff. Even if one of those recent modifications is the reason that one of my former bucket list coasters is no longer a bucket list coaster. Also, I guess the other thing at Mexico, but this is a positive. This is a positive list. We're only talking positive things. So let's just say that I positively adore that Gene Staples saved this classic coaster, and I fully understand why it originally had those crushing shoulder pad rest things. And I'm glad I didn't have to experience that, so I got to ride after the lap bar only conversion. While this may be the weakest of the 3 gigas I've experienced, the original is still insanely fun. It may not be as airtime centric as you'd expect, but this thing is all about speed, besides the ones I talked about. There are a few other rides that constantly feel as fast as this. That doesn't say that negative G's don't exist on this thing though, since you still get a decent amount of float going over those twin camelback humps and the speed hill at the end, especially if you're riding towards the back. I've left Millie up a little bit though because it's also more of an experience than the ride itself, ranging from the absolute rave party from the station music, the lakeside placements, especially on that lift hill, you could probably end up seeing Canada from the top of that thing if it's a clear day, to the twin tunnels in the middle that actually make this ride feel like a time machine. I don't know what they're going to do with it now since Frontierland's closed down, but like it used to be a dinosaur world, it used to be a freaking boat ride, it used to be an old West Town. It literally felt like you just shoot through the thing and then all of a sudden you're in the past. That was a really cool segment. And that really, like I said, made it feel like a time machine between that and the general techno theme of the ride. Also, it was a pretty cool night ride. Even if you're not riding it, then just watch the lift hill. Watch the sequence of lights. It's really cool. On to Lucky 7, we're staying in Cedar Point and moving up the Frontier Trail. Because when you think about Cedar Point these days, you probably think about the giant RMC masterpiece of Frontier Town. As you rightfully should. Did you know, though, that there's another coaster that's just as good living right next door to it? For the longest time, Maverick was my number one at America's Rock and Roller Coaster. While it's just short of 100 feet tall, those launches, the past sparkle drop, all the single drops that eject you, the airtime, and the overall insane transitions all over the place are the biggest proof that size doesn't matter on a coaster. Although that 70-mile-per-hour launch bringing you to near hypercoaster speeds for part of it definitely does help there. Especially if you're lucky enough to be dueling on some of those 6 different little tiny train journey experience. Because this may as well be a Mobius coaster the way the main course divides it into 2 different ride experiences. Just make sure you always ride View. Best train, probably mispronounced, don't care, it's an Epic Wild West coaster. The only thing I regret is that I, of course, never got to experience that legendary roll after the second launch that was modified out pre-opening. Because Trick Track there was just snappy enough, just imagine a Heartline roll going full speed over the lake and through the little rock maneuver quarry thing. Maverick Roll walks so Mosasaurus Roll could run is all I'm saying. Now, let's be real. You all knew Steve was making this list, especially since I just mentioned it, and I apparently have 3 Cedar Point coasters in a row here. I promise I didn't do that on purpose. This Wild Western RMC is one of the biggest and best in the US, but was originally one of the roughest wooden coasters I've ever ridden. Sorry Curtis, I respect your work, but let's be real here. Turned into 2.5 minutes of Alan Shilkey goodness. Massive overbanked airtime hills, floater, ejector, and lats galore, a second lap that's hidden within the structure and an army of head choppers, and some insanely large floaty air versions. Even at the game, those mini hills before the lifts give you a little bit of floater air. Also with the vertical hyper coaster drop, a smooth experience despite the fact that it's kind of an old wooden coaster and those tend to shake just a little bit, just on tendency. And some insane operations even on 2-train op. And you have a winner. I can't tell you how many times I get off this ride just smiling and happily get back in line for the 12-hour line that usually has. Honestly, just the 1-2 punch of this and Maverick means I almost never have to leave Frontier Town these days, and this is a park spanning about 16 other world-class coasters besides these 2 that we're talking about. Okay, time for the best of the best. If you guys stick around this long, make sure to leave a like and comment some of your top 5 coasters down below. Before we get started though, the world's quickest shout out to a coaster that legally has to be on top of this list, even if it's not on the actual top 25 list. What can I say about Vortex that you haven't already heard on this channel? It was probably my first big roller coaster with inversion and stuff. It being 1987 ride means that it's basically my coaster twin because I'm also 1987. And during my years at Kings Island, it was my ride. It was my baby. So I'll just leave a link to like my Vortex tribute up there, so I don't have to go over this section forever. But forever my 0th coaster. The float down the first drop, those crazy floaty corkscrews. Seat 7. 7-1. That was a magic seat. Just back car all by yourself. Rest in peace, Vortex. Kings Island had better replace you with something worthy like a good RMC or a New Age Vekoma or a Max Extreme Spinner or something like that. At number 5 is Intimidator 305. Now, you may have noticed by now that I like things that are a little bit more intense. And there's a reason that King's Dominion had to pretend like this 305-foot tall masterpiece isn't their star attraction and started promoting their mid-tier RMC. I mean, it's more marketable than this forceful machine that literally had to be modified twice in this opening year for how prominent that first turn was. Luckily for me, my first visit was during that opening year, so when I'm pretty sure that was after the trims on the first drop were placed, I still got to go through that blackout turn. That was an experience that I'll never forget. Yes, it's a safe blackout, but like literally the fact that you just snap into that near 90-degree bank turn, boom, lights out, and next thing you know, you're regaining consciousness on top of that second hill. That is an experience. That is insanity. Of course, I've been back in recent years, so I've been on it with the modified curve, whatever thing. But it's still good. It's still good. You know, even without the blackout curve, it's still good. Because the rest of that layout slaps too. Stay low to the ground most of the time. Trick track hill transitions that are super zippy. And while the airtime wasn't really the main focus, it was more than enough to satisfy. Back in the day, pointing to a couple things we just talked about, my first impressions were that this was the love child of Millennium Force and Maverick, and I'm pretty sure that still stands. Honestly, the only thing I'm mad about is for its Big Cat re-theme, that's going to be a Panther, because my precious cheetah is right there. All I'm saying is this is supposed to be a fast kitty cat. What's the Big Cat known for its speed? Number 4. Airtime. Airtime. Why did I take this off? I literally took this off right when I was about to talk about it. I'm sorry, I probably had some sort of process for making my top 25, but this one just has to be there. Want me to look like a simple, family-friendly figure 8 style wooden layouts? This is what turned me into the negative G-loving freak that I am today. And if it's not, it's still, I'm going to blame every single element floats or ejects. That first drop? Sure. The turnarounds? Why not? The quad hill finale everyone always talks about? Yeah, that's pretty good. Personally, though, my favorite element's got to be that double up, double down hill towards the middle of the ride. If you get a good ride on that thing, you basically get higher and higher and higher and higher the more you go through that element. It's a really cool sensation. Add that into a nice pre-lift segment where you just go through this pitch black tunnel and just emerge right next to the line for some really cool views. And what I assume is the epic night ride because I need to go for Phoenix Fall Fun Fest one of these years. And this revival bird, simply just flies. Once we got the way, this thing had me more than hyped for Wolverine Wildcat than Shivering Timbers back when I went to Michigan's Adventures, just because it looked like a near clone. Of course, last time I was saying this in the video, single, ratchet, buzz bars. They just good. They make the airtime 10 bajillion times better. Add all that on to something named after my favorite mythological creature, and yeah, that's why this is like my #1 wooden coaster. As if I need any other reason to visit one of my favorite independent parks besides the fact that it's dog friendly, so I can bring Coney, and that is run pretty well and has the Phoenix. We go Phoenix. I will make any excuse to go Knoebels just to get a few laps in. It's just that good. I'm so mad. I'm so mad that this thing beats out Phoenix for my favorite wooden coaster after I just talked about Phoenix being my favorite wooden coaster. Unfortunately, these numbers don't lie, so at number 3 we have the Voyage at Holiday World. Anyways, you know how my hill park is known for an extremely long wooden coaster that's hidden in the woods and has an amazing night ride? What if you took that concept, but you actually made a twisted, airtime-filled, tunnel-hopping terrain masterpiece with an amazing night ride, of course. Seriously, if you could ever make the Hollywood Nights or any of their other After Dark events, you go just for Voyage. Not sure how much has changed in the last few years with the addition of Mount Thunderbird or whatever, but at least when I got to go to member events, it was just like the weirdest sensation ever. As you went further and further away from the park, there was no lights back there. So it just got darker and darker and darker. And then as you charge back down the hill towards the park, you'd see all the lights start popping up. You just getting brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. Not to mention the mid-course brake run was off, which made the second half of the ride completely different. Night rides aside though, what's there to say except for the hype is actually real? Voyage feels like 3 rides in 1. First off, you got that leg of giant camelback hills hopping in and out of tunnels as you go up the hill. Then once you get the turnaround, it becomes this slowly ground twister that has a couple of overbank turns. And then after the mid-course, that completely stops the ride, except at nighttime events. Underground Triple Down sets you down a path down the hill back towards the park where you get faster and faster and faster, twisting with airtime. And it's just like a combination of first 2 legs into one giant finale. Honestly, the only reason I can't rank this thing any higher is, unfortunately, it is a bit rough. Granted, Holiday World knows how to take care of the kids and reprofiles more and more parts of it every single season. It's just the fact that this is a traditional wooden coaster, and when there's one that is this long and twisty, yeah, it's going to get a bit of rough at times. Still, with marathoning, you just might have to take some breaks between rides for drinks and laps on Gobbler's Getaway. One of my favorite traditional wooden coasters, to be sure. And stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. This is what the Beast should have been. For our runner-up, we're heading back to Florida, because Velocicoaster is probably the one coaster I knew exactly where I'd rank it when I made this initial list. Fully themed experience from the second you enter the line that wouldn't mind waiting on for all those Jurassic Park Easter eggs and launch sequences that you could watch through the first half of the ride. Check. A roller coaster that may as well just be 2 separate rides with how much the first and the second halves are diversified. Check. Epic night ride thanks to this lack of lighting, its location, and the trains themselves being lit. Absolutely. And that's not even talking about the ride experience itself. Chris Pratt likes Velociraptors. The ride is an amazing sequence of flybys, floaty air, inversions, punchy launches, lots of theming, and all kinds of maneuvers in the second half that I could swear Animan literally just stole from RMC. Not to mention the Mosasaurus roll finale. I mean, it's probably as good as people say. This whole thing is an 18 out of 10 experience from when you enter the line under that big top hat, all the way to when you finally get off those comfortable yet minimalistic trains. Literally, the only reason that I can't automatically make my #1 coaster is that honor goes to... You all know this was coming. I literally got these things from the gift shop of Time Traveler. The time travel themed roller coaster is unironically this time travel enthusiast #1. Outside the theme though, which by the way is amazing, from that clock entryway to the station building with all the cogs and gears to dispatching the trains with clock tones, and those trains themselves, those steampunk trains with time dials that actually light up and change themselves. This is a very unique experience with a controlled spin combined with a variety of elements, flow to air, and the high quality launch that we've come to know and love from Mach. Okay, that last part's obviously a lie, but otherwise this thing is absolute perfection, and it's super rideable at that. Definitely a reason to head up to the Ozarks alone, and I'm super jealous of anyone who's been on Ride to Happiness now, which may be one of the biggest reasons I want to do a European coaster adventure one of these days. And I guess why I'd say Mach Extreme Spinner would be like one of the only suitable replacements for Vortex Plot. It's crazy, I basically started this list and ended it with a controlled spin mechanism. So, that's it for me. Like I said, I should be hitting number 400 next summer, so stay tuned for that and make sure you are subscribed to see next year's park vlogs go live. And as long as I'm chilling here, let me point you to my Ko-Fi. If you like what I do here, be sure to drop me a tip, as that all goes towards travel funds for said park trips to bring you all more coaster content. All that said though, what about you? Leave a like if any of the coasters on my list somehow made your top, whatever number your coaster list is. And if you want to complain about how King Cobra almost somehow made my top 10 instead of any of the other honorable mentions I've mentioned, be sure to roast me down below. So, until next time, thank you guys for watching, and always embrace the infinite.